The president at one point said that protesters should be shot in the street. Is that a legal order?
Senator,
he put no conditions
I'm not
on that.
aware of the president giving any order to that nature or effect.
He said it to Secretary Esper. What kind of country are we becoming? The, quote, enemy from within, enemy from within. Want them to see soldiers on street corners, military trucks at intersections, and the visible sign of a police state between Americans and the D.C. National Guard is being fundamentally altered.
Senator Hirono.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I would like to also convey my immense respect for the men and women who serve in the National Guard, and of course, particularly the two brave soldiers who were shot prior to Thanksgiving, one of whom having since tragically passed away. Today's hearing asks a simple but profound question. What kind of country are we becoming? In August, referring to domestic military deployment, the president said, quote, not that I don't have the right to do anything I want to do, I'm the president. Quote, in September, he doubled down, admitting he wants to use American cities as, quote, training grounds, end quote, for the military, telling military leaders to, quote, handle the, quote, enemy from within, before it gets out of control. So we have a president who does not believe that the rule of law applies to him. We have a president who believes that whatever he does and says is lawful. That's why whenever we have witnesses saying that they abide by lawful orders of the president, it makes me question what you think is lawful, because you all believe with the president that whatever he says and does is lawful. Over the past year, this regime has deployed National Guard troops into American cities under legal theories that are untested at best and at worst stretch the law beyond recognition. They have used vague claims of rebellion and chaos to justify putting soldiers with rifles and military vehicles onto our streets, even as crime in many of these cities has actually fallen. Now, this is a regime that does not use facts as the basis for their decisions. We are not here today because local law enforcement failed. We are here because the Trump regime chooses to treat ordinary public safety challenges as a pretext for a sweeping show of force. Again, this isn't about the effectiveness of local law enforcement. How do we know? Because this regime has cut over $800 million in Department of Justice grants to state and local law enforcement for community safety initiatives like policing and violence prevention. We'll hear a lot of illegal stuff, I call it, today, Title 10 versus Title 32, the reach of Section 12406, posse comitatus, but behind those legal debates is a basic question about how we think about the use of power in our democracy. When Americans step out of Union Station in Washington, D.C., for example, do we want them to see soldiers on street corners, military trucks at intersections, and the visible sign of a police state? Or do we want them to see the openness, the energy, and the confidence of a democracy that does not need to put troops on its streets to feel secure? And right now, the daily relationship between Americans and the D.C. National Guard is being fundamentally altered. These deployments are changing how people experience their own capital city and how they view our military. This is not normal. Don't tell me it's normal to have National Guard in, where are the cities? LA, Portland, Chicago, DC, Memphis. Don't tell me this is normal. It is not normal for a president to attack blue cities controlled by Democratic mayors or governors in blue states. This regime has pushed boundaries that prior presidents, Republicans and Democrats alike, respected for generations. And that has to do with the non-politicizing of the military. The American people deserve answers to what we're doing in deploying all these troops to our cities. And, I just want to ask Mr. Young, the president at one point said that protesters should be shot in the street. Is that a legal order? He
Senator,
put no
I'm
conditions
not
on that.
aware of the president giving any order to that nature or effect.
He said it to Secretary Esper.
Senator, I'm not
Take my
aware of
word
that,
for
and
it,
I'm
the
not
pre-
sure when
okay.
that conversation may or may not have
Let's
occurred.
say that the president issued such an order. He said so. He said so. Okay? Is that a legal order?
Senator, orders to that effect would depend on the circumstances.
Well, the
in
president
that the-
applied no conditions. So we have a president who doesn't think that the rule of law applies to him, and he wants to show force. And the question I have for Mr. Detlefsen is, I'd like to know what kind of assessments were done as to the impact of these kinds of deployments that have already used up $340 million to date and more, as long as these troops are going to be continued to deploy to the cities that I've mentioned and others. Like, what kind of assessment done by whom as to what the impact of these deployments are on our readiness and other questions that should be of significance?
Can you
for
answer
you?
that question briefly, Mr. Detlefs?
Yes, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for the question, Senator. In the department, we are constantly assessing all costs related to these deployments, readiness costs, fiscal costs, and I can say without a shadow of a doubt, this is not having a negative effect. This is a modest burden on the department. Most of these deployments are reimbursable in nature. They're not a Department of War bill. And the number of troops that have been deployed are very small relative to the overall National Guard force. And the National Guard Bureau has given us those assessments and said this is not negatively affecting them.
Thank you.
I find
Thank you,
that hard to
Senator
believe.
Hirono.
Thank you.
And Senator Rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. First of all, good morning. I thank you for taking the time to participate in this, and I recognize that as the committee has asked, we brought you in here because we want to learn as much as possible and share that with the American public. I'd also like to take this time to, as my other colleagues have done, to recognize the Guardsmen who are keeping our capital city safe, especially the two West Virginians who were so viciously attacked last month. Our thoughts and prayers go out to the families of Army Specialist Sarah Beckstrom and her family grieving her tragic loss, and Staff Sergeant Andrew Wolf, who survived but has a long road to recovery ahead. Their presence in America's capital made a significant difference, and we honor their service and their sacrifice. Gentlemen, as you know, the National Guard has been deployed to assist with domestic security since before the Constitution was written. Our National Guard has often been deployed to assist in law enforcement operations when state and local authorities were unwilling or unable to do so, ranging from enforcing desegregation laws to helping quell riots. Based on your analysis of historical deployments of the National Guard, do these deployments initiated by the current administration deviate in any material way from the domestic National Guard deployments initiated by previous administrations? And I'm going to start with Mr. Young. I'd really like you, if you could, you've kind of done it a little bit for a number of different members, but you've given a historical context for the legal framework and the use of federal troops for domestic missions. But could you take a few minutes and kind of bring the committee and those listening kind of up to speed as to how this works and the political background on how we actually use the National Guard throughout our history and the legal framework for doing so?
Thank you, Senator. I would be happy to. The nation established a framework of state, federal authorities in being able to administer the National Guard. And in many ways, as the country developed, the National Guard was considered the force of first resort, rather than bringing in troops from the regular Army or the active component Army or Navy or Air Force. The Founding Fathers wanted to resort to utilizing the National Guard because they were citizens and from the communities that were involved. And these books that I have here are just books on the role of federal military forces in domestic disorders. And there's tons of examples of that. It's quite voluminous. There's lots of examples over the course of the nation's history. And most of the deployments that are done in the cooperation or with the cooperation of state authorities. State authorities ask for it. State authorities are in control. Most of them are state-funded many times and state-operated. But there are times when, say, for instance, in Katrina, and needing to be able to address a disaster that was coupled with civil disturbance, the scope and magnitude of the circumstances or the nature of it necessitate federal funding, but they're still under state control. But the Constitution recognized that there would be certain exigent times at which time the country and the president would need to be able to act quickly and be able to mobilize the militia to be able to respond to the threats that were present. And they're enumerated not only in the Constitution, but in the statute that you wrote.